of their reports, they said that the global market for regulation technology, commonly referred to RegTech, will be worth 55 billion by 2025. Amazing stuff. I mean, just so a few years ago that RegTech popped up in terms of regulatory technology. But most importantly, in terms of data and policy decisions, we need to look at, as I said earlier, how best we can harness the power of RegTech in the wake up of this adoption. So, Patrick, with your vast experience in terms of compliance and being a pioneer in RegTech's environment, can you throw some light on how does the entity, will support government and regulatory bodies in harnessing the power of data in terms of RegTech, if you can throw some light on?
Well, that's a very broad question, right? Well, where to start, right? The point is that regulatory technology, it's an amazing tool, and it's a fantastic tool, and also since ChatGPT and generative AI, it demonstrates that there's technologies out there that can really help on a good as well as a bad side. The problem is, and I don't want to go into the past and the history because I just want to focus on the current situation, which is generative AI, such as ChatGPT or all the other applications that would just draw pictures and anything else. They present a unique opportunity for not only companies but also for regulators to shape the future on how to tackle, for instance, financial crime or any other compliance-related topic, because they can add significant value by, for instance, producing sanitized data in a way that's never been there before to test the systems, or you can go through the company data in just a few seconds and identify spots by just asking questions. So from my perspective, what's really keen right now is to, educate regulators and authorities on, what's out there, to come, to a common conclusion on how to use these kind of technologies. There's been some papers issued already, but that's, just on paper, but there's nothing being materialized as far as I'm aware of, where the corporate sector comes together with the IT specialists and the regulators, to join a common working group. I mean, for instance, it would be like a task for, I don't know, Wolfsburg Group or FATF, to come together, sit together, and discuss how they can leverage these emerging technologies. Again, I'm not looking in the past because this is a game changer, and we should talk about the really essential things. That's at least from my perspective. And I've had discussions with regulators about it already. When we had when we went on a meeting just a few weeks ago, and we discussed it, and they're just afraid their claim was that it's not transparent. We don't know what happens with the data. It's so it's like a big bubble, and we don't know what's inside. And all of those things are totally true. But then you have to take one step back, and you have to sit together with the right people at the same time, at the same desk, and you have to figure it out. And that's what I'm currently working on, to figure out how to use these technologies for it.
Okay. That's nice to hear from your perspective. I think looking at your background and experience, you give us a practical view to that. James, DVG, what has been your practical experience in supporting the various governments and regulators, for that matter, that you have been engaged in, the various countries that you have been operating in supporting this data RegTech stuff?
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question. At DVG, we are very lucky because we've been working in Africa for the past 25 years. Prior to be involved in the RegTech world, we were a prominent telecom providers. So in the late 90s, early 2000s, we saw a complete shift in the market with the liberalization of the market when you start having mobile network operators. And then we saw a problem. We saw that those newly empowered regulatory bodies, the telecom regulators, now they are supposed to oversee this complex ecosystem. This is when we started to develop solutions to assist and equip those telecom regulators so they can start monitoring compliance in the sector. We started with basic solutions such as quality of service. Then we went into traffic monitoring to have all the voice traffic. Now, by working with them, we started to see other needs they have and other requirements. That's how today we have a full big data solution that can that is connected at the core network of the mobile network operators to capture in real time all the information that the telecom regulator needs in order to oversee compliance in that sector. Now, after that, we saw mobile money, and also that became very popular in many countries. And with the rise of mobile money, which is one on the telecom backbone as a telecom infrastructure, we're also very privileged to be able to access information and start now serving not only the telecom regulator, but also the central bank to help them monitor AML, to help them monitor KYC and so on. So at GVG, I would say we are very lucky that before even the RegTech was coined, we are also somehow involved in the whole process, especially in developing countries and in Africa. So now today, how our solutions work, we position ourselves as at the core network to be at the central location where we collect all data points that the different authorities need. The telecom regulators, the revenue authorities to monitor, let's say, for revenue assurance purpose, and also central bank when it comes to economic information they need on the mobile money sector. Just to give you a few examples, when COVID hit in 2020 in Ghana, the Ministry of Communication and NCA, they wanted to implement a very quick policy in order to help people, the low-income people, by sending them mobile money funds.
Mobile money, yeah.
Since the common platform that we implemented in Ghana has all of those information, we're able to very quickly put in place and queries and get all the information to profile different people depending on the level of transaction they are performing in that sector. So this is where we could give them a list of what we believe, based on certain information, are the lowest, the people in the lowest income tranche of the population, and this way they were able to provide help.
James, I must say that it was something that I saw it very interesting during those times, and it was speak to market, and
exactly
appreciated it much. Yeah. So basically, it's like GVG is at the center of data technology here, you know.
Exactly. Information is the sorry to interrupt. For information is our local company in Ghana, but over the continent we operate as GVG. Yes.
Okay. So let me run to the regulator, the one with the experience, and to confirm whether indeed the entities, as you say, GVG and Patrick's experience, bottles it to the regulator, you know. So, Madam Frida, tell us, how has the regulator collaborating with all these entities to ensure that we, in the space of RegTech, all is well? I mean, compliance and everything is going in terms of maybe some regulatory perspective policies that also seeks to deepen the collaboration with these entities.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and answer the question as much as possible from the perspective of the telecommunications regulator.
Okay.
Obviously, telecoms is not CBN, it's not the central bank, who are both regulators in the financial inclusion sector. But we start from a different perspective because we are the enablers. While the CBN is the one that regulates on a day-to-day basis, the NCC, by putting it in place the communications infrastructure, both for voice and data, has become an enabler for harnessing the power of data. That's just a fact. The Everything you do, data is at the front and center because every business decision, transaction monitoring, everything is based on availability of data. And we are not going to go back to the old days when the banks and there would have been no of use pencil and paper to record your name and how much you took and how much you put. So communications technology is actually the driver of financial inclusion. As you know, so what has NCC done to harness the power of data? We have put in place 4G so that people in every area can access communications and the service in the underserved, unserved, and the most rural areas. We've also licensed recently, as some of you know, 3 companies for the rollout of 5G technology: MAFAP Communications, MTN, and Airtel, who were already licensees of the commission. We also have the satellite communication license, and I'm sure you've heard recently that we have Starlinks now in Nigeria. And one of the benefits of Starlinks is that it can go to, because it's satellite, can go to the nooks and crannies of the nation where the others are not able to penetrate. That way, we can have communication and financial services in the most remotest of areas. So that is some of the ways that the NCC, by providing the enabling infrastructure, whether it's the submarine cables, they are also our licensees. So data is passing through all these channels, including the effort of the NCC currently to ensure that the 7 infrastructure company licensees, which have been granted, are really functional. And that way we can have fixed broadband, so you can have fiber to the home, fiber to business, fiber to hospitals, and that way we can have, it gives you the capacity to have broad data that can be moved. So that's in the area of infrastructure. Another thing the NCC has done to harness the power of data is obviously the work with the registration, SIM card registration. That is actually key because when you talk of data, you're talking of security. So we can only work from the area of our own mandate. So by ensuring that all SIM cards are registered with the registration provided by the National Identity Commission, who give these numbers, this NIN is actually mandatory before you can register a SIM card. And I think we now had the regulation. Okay. I think they said my video speed, so they would take off my video maybe because of the quality of the video. So we have regulations that are helping to drive this. For example, we have the registration of communication subscribers regulation 2022. It was initially 2011, now it's now 2022. And this we have a central database, which is discussed in part 2. And this database is the warehouse of all the data, and NCC works hand in hand with National Identity Management Commission so that we can have a database of unique users. And I think as of last count, NIMC has confirmed there are over 90 million of clean data of Nigerians. And also this continuous focus of the NCC, like I said, as a security of the data. So we have our Consumer Code of Practice regulations, and in part 4, part 6, it talks about the protection of consumer information because you need to give the consumers confidence. If there is no confidence, there is nobody going to use the system. And we also have the Internet Code of Practice, which is one of our regulations. And in part 4.0, we also talk about the privacy and data protection obligations that our licensees have to play. So in summary, how does the NCC work to harness the power of data? First, by giving the right connectivity and making connectivity and making access affordable, accessible across Nigeria using different technologies, wired and wireless, by ensuring that SIM cards are registered so that you can have clear identity of the people. So when you're doing transaction monitoring, you know who is, and also ensuring our various regulations or regulatory documents that the protection of consumer
Thank you very much,
information
Frida.
is
Very, very,
sacrosanct for
very
the
insightful
licensees. Thank you.
policy highlights here. Patrick, let me come back to you. Following from what Madam Frida have just said, as in with all these policy enablers from the regulator perspective in ensuring a robust data integrity, as in the SIM card registration, network coverage, and also the digital economy strategies put all together. What is the best practice and strategy for government globally, okay, and regulatory bodies to improve compliance in the data management, i.e., reduce revenue leakages and to address revenue mobilization for financial sustainability in the economy? In this, what's your take on this?
Richard said right. Data is key, and with data, everything starts and ends. And there's been a huge shift in in terms of regulators using data and companies leveraging data over the last couple of years. So if you ask me what's best practice is exploring what to do with data. And we've heard it in the presentation before about the regulatory sandbox. That's one of the greatest examples. I mean, it started with the SCA in the UK, with the MSA in Singapore, and there was one in Hong Kong. There's chief in the global regulatory sandbox. Again, and this goes back also my earlier point is bringing all the stakeholders at the same table. Because it is about exploring. It's not about, and it is currently also, ChatGPT and everything else, right? They're still saying, we're in draft mode and we're trying to figure it out. It's research and everything else. Mm-hmm. It is about figuring out what is possible. So, for instance, I think it was last year when the G7 or G8 summit was happening in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They also launched a hackathon on how can we better have regulatory reporting. So unfortunately, guys, that didn't pick my or our idea, but there was a huge discussion around it, right? Because information and data is available. The question is, how do you deal with it, and how do you treat it? And from a regulatory perspective, they want to have all the information. But I was speaking with regulators before in the past, and I said, look, guys, feel free. You can have access to all of our data. Crunch the numbers, have fun. And then they said, we don't have the capacity, or capability, as well, right? That's why bringing these worlds together makes a lot of sense. And from my perspective, what really would help is, standardization of what's going on. Okay. I live in the EU, and if I go just travel within Germany, to be honest, there's a form for X. Let's say I want to buy a house, just as an example. There's a form here, and if I move, I don't know, 30K away, there's another form for the same purpose. So if regulators want to really make it efficient work, and if corporates want to also make it efficient work, they have.
Hold on, there seems to be call drop. Jace, can you hear him?
I can hear you.
But can you hear Patrick, please?
No, we cannot hear Patrick.
I can hear you.
Patrick, you went a bit off.
Yeah.
Something with your mic.
No.
Yeah, maybe it's the mic. I can see you, Patrick.
Yeah.
Technology. Sure. Yeah, Patrick, can you hear us? Wave if you can hear me. Sure, but I can't hear you. He's gone off.
I think it's going to try to
Can you hear me now?
reconnect.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so I don't know why or whatever.
Yeah, we can hear.
And I don't know where you lost me, right? And I don't want to reiterate everything.
So you were. I last lost you at where you said you are in the EU, and then there are talking about standardization of and forms here and there, compliance and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important parts is that there is going to be standards, and there are standard setting bodies. And these standard setting bodies, the mentioned before, like FATF or Wolfsburg Group or anyone else, it's supposedly their role, but I think that the industry should drive them, towards it, to really say, if they want to get the maximum out of the controls, and as a best practice, right? That there's other countries that are really doing amazing jobs with, the regulatory sandboxes, and it works super well. Although there's also room for improvement. For instance, I could give like a stamp and say, look, this solution is really amazing, you can use it. And I'm just saying that get past it. And it should be further expanded to other areas as well. I think that could be a problem that can be easily solved by allowing companies not only have like one cohort per quarter, but allowing companies to just enter a process where they work together along with the regulators to bring their products to market and say, look, we're going to try it out, you're going to assess it. Of course, there's limitations in terms of capabilities, but from my perspective, worth it to spend. And then you can scale. The problem right now with all of this, initiatives that they're doing is they're trying to show off. From my perspective, they're trying to say, and no offense to any regulator not looking into this, and please, you can still contact me, but it is about trying and exploring. But the model behind it is not scalable. And if you really want to bring a lot of products that are amazing in RegTech to market, you just scale and scale fast and scale quick. And that's we're not there. I don't know any country where that's there, because they're still exploring instead of taking the next step and figuring out on how to just, for instance, there's so many ISO standards, just do one for RegTech.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Thank you. You've justified your opinion here with practical example. James, what do you say about best practices in harnessing revenue mobilization and also revenue leakages, addressing revenue leakage? I know GVG has been in this space for a number of years and stuff. What's the best practice using RegTechs here and there in line with the regulators?
Yes, I think the key here is, as Patrick said, data is key. We live in a world where massive amounts of data are being produced. The good news is we know where the data are sitting. We know, for instance, if strategically you take the key operators like MTN, Airtel, Tigo, and Vodafone, they, through their network, they are all the data related to financial transactions, mobile money mainly, and all the data related to phone usage and so on are there. So now the starting point is to sit down with the regulator and then identify their objectives. Once that is defined, you will then derive the infrastructure that we need to put in place. And I like the example of Ghana because what we've seen in many countries is like you have central banks that have their own platform, you have a revenue authority that has their own platform, you have the regulator the telecom regulator. So I think in Ghana, what happened is there was a consensus where many government agencies, they work together to put in place a common platform, because that saved a lot of money for the government, because by having a common platform, they are all of them leveraging on a single infrastructure, and then having different kind of analytics that can run for different purposes. So this is, for me, I think it's in a way you need also to have the proper regulation in place, allowing this kind of collaboration between different government agencies. Now, I'd like to take it a step further. We're talking now at the level of country. Now, in terms of policies and regulations, I think it's time now, and that's why we really encourage collaboration between countries through harmonization of different regulatory policies, because for Africa really to position itself and really have a voice, it's very important that different regulatory bodies can work together to harmonize their policies so we can reach that objective by creating a digital single market. Because the regulation that is current in Ghana today might be so different than the one in Nigeria. How can we expect further collaboration between the same economic providers in Ghana and in Nigeria? So those are other aspects also that I believe are very important to look at.
Thank you very much. So fundamentally, at the best practices angle, as we discussed, we've looked at, as Patrick said, we need standardization of compliance. And we all agree that it's about data. So we need data integrity, a robust data integrity, right? And then we need to scale fast and scale quick in this space, right? And you mentioned the fact that we need to harmonize policy across countries, across industry players here for at least not anything, but maybe cost of doing business to go down and stuff. So, Madam Regulator, Patrick, do you want to come in before I call the regulator here?
Yeah, and I hope the voice is working now.
Yeah, the voice is working.
Perfectly fine. James, what you just said is very interesting, right? And if it comes to creating policies and regulations, everything is regulated in the world, right? Except for RegTech and of course many other things right now. But bottom line is that also RegTech itself or fintech, they don't have a voice, they don't have a lobby that's strong enough to influence what's happening. Right? If you're sitting in parliament and you have to do regulate, how a banana should look like, for this sake, they're not focusing on, on these aspects. First of all, they don't understand because nobody tells them, and secondly, it's not a priority. I think, and James, this is a really good point that you mentioned, right? And I have many friends in politics, and you stress it with them. Is that there should be actually a lobby for RegTech to have a voice, to have someone lobby what's really relevant and how to do it. So it's really great that you raised this this matter, and writing it down. It's really good.
Yeah. But I think RegTech conference have started voicing out for the past 2-3 years. So it's getting it. We just need stakeholders to buy into this to be bigger and also get more international people to join in terms of lobbying for the voice of fintechs and RegTech at the same time. Yeah, we'll get there. Madam Frida, the regulator. What is your perspective in terms of best practices, regulatory best practices for RegTech operations so far?
Okay, for me, I want to go from the perspective of something you have said, which is the data integrity. Data integrity is actually the most pivotal in everything because yes, you have data, but is that data trustworthy? What business analysis can you make from that data? What can you garner from that data? And now we're talking about, improve compliance in the data management to reduce leakages and to address revenue. How do you reduce leakages when you do not have clean data? One of the areas that I want to talk about is the SIM card and the BVN. In Nigeria, the banks register you, they give you something called the BVN, and you use your thumbprint and put all your details the same way you do with the SIM card. And right now, we don't have a SIM card and a BVN harmonization. And for a lot of things we do, USSD, banking, and even, I think the banks have different tiers of banking where some you only need your phone number and this and that. But those things are not harmonized. And then you have people with one identity and different from what they have in their BVN. And how are you going to identify and say this is the same person if you're trying to avoid or if you're trying to prevent revenue leakages and losses? Another thing I want to mention is the national identity number. I think the process still has a long way to go because what usually comes to mind is garbage in, garbage out. For example, now, if you want to get your national identity number, you might need to go get a court affidavit saying you were born on this date at this location. Now, who is going to confirm that that thing you have said is true? Let's even say it's true. You have a date and you have a birth certificate and you provide it. There's nothing to say where you live. You are the one that writes it. So I had the privilege to go register somebody recently who lives in my house, and I got her birth certificate. But she just put my address. But there was nothing to check to make sure that address she's put in is accurate. So this is what I talk about, the credibility of the data. So this is where you need to have a lot of harmonization with different systems. For example, one thing I believe is that you must have innovative solutions that address your own needs. And for Nigeria, instead of just doing a plugin, ask what do we need. If you ask me, for example, birth certificates, when it comes to names of parents, should actually have their national identity number or something. You must be able to link a person to somewhere else to make sure that at the end of the day, you're going to have data that is actually clean. But as long as the data that is used to drive everything, which is going forward, national identity, and a lot of the data being input cannot be
I agree
verified,
with you.
I think we cannot have data integrity. Another one that I think is a very big, yeah, thank you. Another one that is a big issue for me is that there is a need for the harmonization of the various databases we have. We have data held by the immigrations, we have data held by education sector, primary, high school, university. We have data held by the health sector, both primary and both government and private hospitals of people. We have car, motor registration. You have data held by the prison and law enforcement agencies on people. We have lands and housing data on people, aviation, your employment data, national population, your births and deaths registration data. You have banking, and you have data held by telecommunications providers. So you have pockets of data of people, but there is literally no centralized database. So I think it is way past the time that we develop a national centralized database where you can pull in data from all sectors of the economy and bring it into a database and then clean up this database. So by the time, so if I tell you this is my name, some kind of land and housing database, we trace if that is me, my employment link, my bank link, and then you would
Sorry,
end
it
up
seems
with a
we are losing
database
you a
that is
bit.
pure, that is clean, that you can use for decision making, you can use as government, you basically. Oh, sorry. I just said it will now be a database that you can use for everything, and you would now find all the leakages and all gone because everybody can be traced, and that is the
Exactly.
beginning of being able to have
Exactly.
good
Thank you.
financial
There's a lot of
and
disaggregate
transaction
data
monitoring
or
when you
data
have a
sitting in
database
silos in
that is
Africa
trustworthy
for
and
that matter.
verifiable.
I don't think
Thanks.
it is so in the European space for now. We'll come back to Patrick, but before that, I want to get to James. what is your experience with data integrity and harmonization, especially in Europe compared to Africa, especially with your diverse experience across the globe?
Yeah, I think one of the best example I've seen is the Estonian experience, where they have these public infrastructure on the back to support like data sharing between different institutions. I think for me is one of this is called the Project X Road, and I think in Togo they are trying to implement something similar, and that for me is the best way where that solves what Madame Frida was talking about, where there is it becomes at the policy level, at the top level, at the government, where they decide, listen, this is how different institutions, I mean, you are pulling data, how this data sharing should be done, and this way you can consolidate all the information. Now, in Africa, in many countries where we work, it's quite a challenge because those government agencies, they operate in silos. So you might have data from the telecom regulator on the SIM registry, which is sometimes they don't even have that consolidated, okay? And so it becomes a major challenge when you try to link identity to transactions. But the good news is many countries are taking the steps in the right direction. When we take the case of Uganda, the case of Kenya, the case of Rwanda, for example, where they managed to clean up the SIM registry database and link that with the national identity databases. I think it's a movement, and I think people are realizing, okay, data, massive tons of data, it's interesting, but if you cannot ultimately link that to identity, it somehow might be useless. So for certain use case, of course. But again, it's something that is ongoing, that we are seeing at least there's a clear agenda in many countries in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Patrick, I had to run quickly by you to throw your perspective on data integrity harmonization. Especially in Africa, you realize that, as we discussed, we have that challenge now. But with my little experience in Europe, I don't see it as a challenge. I don't know whether you share the same point with me, that it seems Europe is more coordinated or harmonized in terms of data. Or tell me.
Good luck with that one. No, just first of all, going back to Jamie's point, interestingly, I'm an e-citizen of Estonia, and I have a company in Estonia, and everything goes 100% virtual.
Cool.
So that's quite advanced. I've never been there, and I'm running a full-fledged company in Estonia. So that being said, data and data standardization, credibility, I mean, everything else has been explored in Europe. The most successful approach that right now we have here is called eIDAS. It is a standardized way of identifying yourself using your passport virtually. So it's a European, or the standard by the European Union, that allows you to basically conduct certain businesses as well, sign documents, in a legal manner, within Europe, which is accepted by the courts, that they say it is like the same way it's been, physically signed. That being said, because it's Europe, every country has their own implementation, their own standards. I mean, they're all adhering to the same standard, right? And the Nordics are quite advanced. The more you go south, the less advanced it is. So in Germany, to be honest, it takes me like, I don't know, 5 minutes to do this, because it's just it's not best practice. It's some politicians over engineering stuff. But we're getting there. In terms of standardization, no, there is no good standardization in Europe. in terms of data collection, data management, or anything alike. And that's a quite unfortunate thing, right? Because I think it has to come from someone above the EU, such as FATF, or someone who just says, look, that's our new standard. And it makes it very complicated in terms of RegTech also for regulators, because they get data and they can just put it together in a data lake and start running the investigation, because it's unstructured data in most cases, on paper, on emails, whatever it is. But it does not justify that it's very good. And in terms of data integrity, the problem is that it's so diverse. It's so many different standards, so many different things, because every country thinks they're special. They have different demands. To be honest, I mean, they could agree on a passport, and data fields aren't there. So they maybe might be able to also agree on a bit more to really properly run checks, because I think that's a crucial thing. Data integrity itself, I don't think it's an issue. I think every country has very, has data that's very, depending on the level, right? But integrity is high. It's just that there are so many different pools of data and different data sets. So same question asked differently, last name or surname, which makes life more complicated to really align on anything that makes data be useless at the end of the day, because you spend so much time on just getting the data together. But data integrity itself, I don't think it's an issue. I think it's the issue about combining different sources of data to make them to make them at a level of integrity together that's being useful, and not spending too much time of analyzing it. I don't know. James is nodding, but I'm curious to hear about your experience.
Yeah, but before James, you come, let me try and move to, because we seems to be even answering my next question on the line, that is, how do we address the overall emerging challenges to harness the future prospect in the RegTech ecosystem, especially as we attempt to prescribe solutions to the challenges. So James, as you try to respond to Patrick's teasing your take on his, what are the challenges, and how do we combat all this, or mitigate all these challenges as part of solutions to harness RegTech compliance?
Again, I think it's it requires a few actions that have to, first of all, where different. Of course, the vision should be clear at country level. To top level, listen now. There is this philosopher from Israel, Yuval Harari, who said, now, if you want to colonize a country, do not send the text in, get the data out, because there's a way that the value of data cannot be better explained. So now, harnessing data should be at the core of a vision of the country at the top level. Now, at all different agencies, what we discussed earlier, instead of working in silos, there should be these consensus where all of them should work together by defining the needs. What are the data? Which type of data is available for depending on the sector? Now, putting in place this common infrastructure, working with the technical experts, this way you can start like at a common level, enriching those data, making sure that their integrity, and now start providing different channels to different agencies within the country, so they can, first of all, oversee their respective sectors using data, so they can make data-driven decisions. And then that can also even help the private sector to, for example, to know exactly where, for example, there might be a need to deploy certain type of solutions. So those are information that can be data sharing practice that can be established between the stakeholders. So this way, not only the regulatory bodies, but everyone, all the stakeholders can really take benefits from the data that are available within specific countries.
Patrick, is your hand up?
Yeah, but that's a specific point, right? There is no collaboration. It's a one-way reporting, and that's a crucial thing that doesn't take us any further.
It's a policy decision at the end of the day. It has to.
Someone is just getting data and deciding upon whatever data there is, but no one is feeding back information.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at all of the stuff that's coming out of the policies, it's just based on whatever they think it's the right thing to do, but without real consultation.
Great. So in trying to wrap up, which I have some alert that we need to be wrapping up, I'll run to the regulator in terms of collaboration. What is his view, Frida? What is your experience and view in terms of collaboration to harness this ecosystem that we of RegTech?
Okay, thank you. I will first of all go back to Patrick, where Patrick believes that data integrity.
If I'm just correct, I did not say it's not important. I said it's important. I think data integrity,
but I also agree with Patrick,
is already good.
No, hold on.
I did not say it's not important. I think it's important.
Okay. So sort of like it's done and dusted, and that we need to move on, right?
Okay, maybe it's good where you are. Okay. Okay. Maybe it's the integrity might be okay where you are, but it's not okay where I am in. And also something you said, which is about which is standards. I believe very much one of the challenges why we don't have clean data. And you alluded to it, Patrick, when you said one form says surname, the other form says last name. And when you do not have the standards, you now give room to ensure your data is not clean. And another thing is education. I remember when we first commenced the SIM registration process about 12, 13 years ago. And we would go and monitor what the mobile network operators were doing. And we'll see Nigerians filling in the forms, and they would ask for maiden name, your mother's maiden name. And people will write a man's name. Sometimes they write their mother's first name. And when I see that, I'll be like, your mother's maiden name, it's not your mother's name. It's your mother's surname, the name her father gave her as her father's last name before she married. And then they're looking at me and their eyes are rolling because they don't understand. And I think that education is also a barrier. It's a barrier, especially in Nigeria, where you have a lot of people living in rural areas where English is not their first language. And they're not able to fully understand, so they're not able to enter things properly. But for me, the greatest challenge from the perspective of the regulator, always remember I'm from the telecom sector, I would say that political will for a centralized database, because you have these pockets of data. The only person that can coordinate this data has to start from right at the top, because there is no one agency that has overall coordination. So they coordinate that, and nobody is coming up and saying, as a nation, we can't continue like this. Let me bring experts or consultants and carry all these databases and create something that we can use as a nation. So until that political will and that understanding of the critical role that data plays to national development is understood at the highest level, we might actually not be able to fully harness
and then we need the willpower to do that and policy to drive it. Ladies and gentlemen, here we have to bring it to a close of this section. And I want to thank you very much, Patrick and James and Madam Frida, for your insightful discussion and perspective with this. We've established the point that we need standardization, we need data integrity, we need to harmonize policies and harmonize platform to advance and harness RegTech in the ecosystem. Thank you very much, and have a fruitful day and other section yet to come. Thank you very much. Your moderator, Frederick Asmanu, thanks you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, James. And thank you, Frederick. Bye.